Welcome to another episode of Complete Developer Podcast, the podcast by coders for coders about all aspects of creating your best life as a developer.
I'm Will, the accomplished developer and aspiring software architect.
And I'm Beej, the journeyman developer, sharing my journey in development.
Complete Developer Podcast is supported by listeners like you. We are now on Patreon at www.patreon.com/Complete Developer Podcast.
We made it to episode 200, almost 4 years into podcasting, and it feels like we're just getting our feet under us. There is so much that we've learned the past 200 episodes, from audio engineering to coding and tech skills to insights into ourselves and our own interactions. And there's so much more we have yet to learn. In this episode, we're going to take a look back at the things that we've learned, what we've enjoyed, and some of the hard times that we've had over the last 200 episodes. It's kind of a retrospective of our first 200 and a looking forward to our next 200. But before we get started, Will, what have you been fighting this week?
Oh, man. I'm still in SQL purgatory, so I'm dealing with that during the day. And then at night, I am still working on book edits. So I get to deal with the messed up English language instead of SQL.
And your messed up English language that I have to deal with all the time?
Yeah. And then, exactly. However, the Russian lessons are going well. I'm getting awesome. Where I can kind of read. So that's good. I'm starting to get homework in there too. So that's a can of worms. So that ought to be entertaining, but I'm enjoying it. Yeah, it's good times. I mean, it was a little bit rushed today trying to get the episode finished up. I think I had it done by like 6:01, and I told you I'd have it done by 5:30. So it's close enough for programmer time, honestly. So how about you?
Man, this week has been fun. Just getting everything together and stuff for this episode. Well, we finally made it to production at work. The business app that I've been working on for almost 2 years now is in production and being used by employees and customers. It went live a little earlier this week, and we're wrapping things up on the team and kind of gearing up for the next app that we're going to be working on. I'm really excited because this is allowing me some time to work on a few enterprise level services that I've been wanting to build. That's just going to make our jobs easier as programmers there. So I'm getting to do a bunch of little small cool things and play around with some neat stuff. I'm doing some .NET Core stuff that's just really cool, and I'm just really excited about it. Since school's out and things are calming down work-wise, I've decided I'm not taking anything extra on this month, to Will's frustration sometimes. I'm using it to relax and catch up. Still doing my regular commitments, like anything that I do on a consistent basis, like our meetup group and my church stuff. I'm keeping up with that. It's just nice to not have anything extra going on. This has allowed me to, you talk about learning Russian. This has allowed me to focus on my guitar. I've been taking lessons since I moved down here. I started trying to teach myself before I moved, and then found a really great instructor. And so I've been doing that. Recently learned the intro, the lead to Sweet Child of Mine, and I am not, but I'm getting faster at it. Actually was practicing while Will was writing his outline, and was almost a little bit late because I kind of got into it and forgot what time it was. So that's really cool. It's also allowed me to do a lot more reading. Honestly, y'all, it's been a while. Med school kind of burnt me out, and I stopped doing reading for fun and pleasure because I spent so much time with my head in a book. Now I've got a stack of books by my bedside and in the living room because I read like most people used to watch TV before Netflix. I'll read one book for a little bit and I'll put it down. I'll pick up another one, read a few chapters, put it down, pick up another one. Like people used to watch TV when they just sit in front of it and shows would come on the air. So,
yeah, like when you couldn't stream.
Yeah.
In the dark times.
In the dark ages before binge watching shows on Netflix. Yeah.
When you had to go all the way to Blockbuster if you wanted to do something on demand.
Yep. But with all that said, I've got something bookish and completely different for IoTs, or maybe bookoTs. Since episode 200 is a milestone, we're going to try something different starting this month. It helps that this episode is coming out as the first episode of the month, so it kind of flows. Instead of a weekly IoT segment, I'm going to be reading a book, not reading it to you guys, but I'm going to be reading a book each month and then talking a little bit about what I've read. I'll announce the book beforehand, so that everyone has an opportunity to get a copy if you want to read along. This is going to be kind of a fun experiment. We'll do it for a few months, see how it goes. And you guys give us feedback. Let us know what you think of it. The first book that we're going to be reading is The Pragmatic Programmer by Andrew Hunt and David Thomas. Not the Wendy's Dave Thomas. I mentioned this book several times before. Basically, anytime anyone asks for my favorite books or a reference, it's really good. One of the things that I like most about it is that you don't have to read it cover to cover, but you can move from different areas and just find what you need to help and go straight there. So I have a link to the book in our show notes, and you guys can look at that and pick up a copy if you want. Who's talking to us this week?
Well, we got an iTunes review from Caducey saying, Beej and Will have touched my life with their work. I discovered the Complete Developer podcast while searching for inroads to a tech career from building maintenance. This has been a difficult search. When I found this podcast, I wasted no time downloading and devouring every episode in just a few weeks. These guys have given me hope, grounding, and direction to accomplish a monumental task in my life. This is a needful resource. Thanks, Will and BJ, and please keep it going.
This is exactly the service that we're trying to provide. Thank you for letting us know that we're accomplishing our goals. This is something we needed for, I guess, 200. We've been doing this for a while, and it's nice to hear that, hey, we're making a difference. When we set out to make this podcast, that was the goal, was to help people like you move into the career, help people in the career get better at it. Like, hearing that is very encouraging to us. So I just want to say thank you. Send us an email with your contact information, because we've got a Complete Developer water bottle just for you. And guys, if you'd like your very own Complete Developer water bottle, leave us a review in iTunes or comment on the website or any of our social media. We post all our episodes to Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. We're also on Instagram and Tumblr. You can check us out each week on Facebook and YouTube Live, when we talk about what's going on in the tech world and answer some listener questions. Or join the conversation anytime via Slack by going to slack.completedevelopernetwork.com. You realize I have said some variation of that 200 times?
Yeah, that's pretty insane. You know, just all the things that have happened 200 times.
No.
Like including, all the fart jokes while we're testing the microphones. Like that's happened 200 times, because we did that on the first one. I'm pretty sure.
Almost 200 times. We don't do that when we've got guests.
Okay, there is that. But yeah, like that's one of the few things that hasn't changed.
That's true. Take the number of guests we've had and subtract that from 200, and you'll hear the number. Well, you won't hear them, but you'll have the number of fart jokes we've made.
Yeah, well, realistically, there's also a Facebook Live, and so that's padded. And then there's multiple recordings of some episodes because we had problems. So we might be right at 200.
Oh, man, that's kind of weird and scary, but yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So when we started this podcast, we had been friends for a very long time. I think we started hanging out in 2000 or 2001.
2000.
Was it 2000? So anyway, we've seen each other through good and bad times over this whole stretch, right? Including during the recording of this podcast at various points.
Yes.
And that's part of where the dynamic of the show originates. Through the past few years, we've both grown quite a bit as individuals and as friends. You really get a very different look inside somebody's head when you're sitting across from them podcasting for literally 200 plus hours. And it's probably, I don't know how many hours. I don't even want to think about that. Plus, you've heard the episodes over and over again as you've been doing all the editing. So there have been some mishaps. It's a challenge to create content like this on a weekly basis or an almost weekly basis, sometimes stacking them up ahead of time. Once or twice, we've had to publish episodes a little later than normal, but I think we've produced a pretty good quality show over all this period of time for almost 4 years.
Every week. We have not missed a week in almost 4 years.
Unless it was scheduled, I think. Or maybe like if somebody had the flu or something.
Well, we didn't record, but we have not missed publishing. We have published an episode every week for almost 4 years.
Yeah, and I don't think there have been any that have dropped later than like 2 o'clock in the morning, have there?
There have been a few in the early days, because when we first started, we were dropping them around 6 or 7 in the morning. And then there were a few that didn't get dropped until a little bit later because I would schedule it. And then I'd wake up in the morning and it hadn't gone out. And so I'd have to jump on and figure out what happened. And
that's right. Like where they bounce the servers.
Yeah, they bounced the servers and then they didn't go back and go, oh, hey, this was scheduled to publish at midnight, which is why we published them at 1, by the way.
Yeah. It's like, hey, nobody schedules cron jobs for midnight or any, I don't know, integer hour time at night. Nobody does that. So let's just bounce the server right then. So anyway, this episode, we're going to talk about our journey over these past 200 episodes. And we'll start with where we were when it all began and then talk about where we are now. Next, we're going to discuss some of the lessons that we've learned through podcasting, followed by talking about the opportunities that we've had open up to us. After that, we'll get to the fun part and talk about our favorite episodes and parts of podcasting. And then we'll close out talking about some of the funny things that happen when you record together every week for almost 4 years.
Starting out, our journey through and with podcasting. We're going to start off talking about where we were in life when we got started. And we're going to talk about kind of our career and our life and where we were when we started. So, Will, where were you in your career when you started the podcast?
I was contracting. I had been let go. That spring I had gotten a full-time job, gotten converted. I was went there through a recruiter. 2 weeks after getting converted, I was let go. Then I switched over to contracting and I was doing some stuff at night as well on another project. And so at that point, I wasn't really making very good money. I was just kind of scraping by, to be honest. And I was kind of wanting to get a real business going, as opposed to like skating by contracting, but I didn't have the time or really all of the skills that were required to do it. I kind of thought I did, but looking back, I didn't. As far as life at that point, I was extremely shy. You can't hear it in the early episodes because Beach cut it out, but fairly early on there were a lot of times that I would be talking and I would just pause because I realized that like 50 people are listening to me talking. This was a long time ago. We will probably have 2,500 to 3,000 listen to this episode and I don't care. So that's where I was at that point. Now, the other thing I was doing a lot of is I was consuming content. I was listening to podcasts. I was reading blogs. I was watching movies. I was playing video games. I was doing all that stuff. I wasn't creating content very much.
When we first started this, I wasn't even in development. I was still learning. I was working in sales at the time. I had just started doing my apprenticeship with Will. Was very much a newbie. I think that was in our tag. Or our opening. Will was the curmudgeonly experienced developer, and I was the optimistic newbie developer.
Yeah.
And I was coming out of a very dark place in my life, probably the darkest place I'd ever been. I was recently divorced, had been going through some pretty intense depression and adjustment to basically all of my dreams and goals coming crashing down on me and having to restart my life. I had just moved back to Tennessee. I was still living with family because I didn't have I'd just gotten a job to basically cover the bills. And I wasn't even making enough to move out on my own when we started this. I was driving about an hour and a half to 2 hours every week down to Will's to record. So
Yeah,
it was,
I remember those days.
yeah, it was a rough time in my life. And one of the things that helped me have some focus and gave me a purpose was that I was editing and I was doing all the audio for the podcast, and I had to do it because someone who was giving me a lot and helping me out was relying on me to do that. I remember there were a lot of nights that I did not want to edit. I was not into it. I wanted to just, watch TV or play video games or something like that. And I was like, no, it's not for me. I'm doing this because, my best friend is relying on me to get this done.
Yeah.
And so that helped me regain my own ability to have internal motivation.
Yeah. Because, you were really in a dark place, and especially a few months before that, it was very touch and go there for a while. So let's talk about how things have changed since then. For myself, I have a full-time job at a growing company, and I'm in a software architecture role. And I will have been with this company for 4 years this August. I got hired. I got hired there while we were in the early stages of the podcast. I'm not even sure we'd actually dropped an episode at that point because it was August 17th.
Yeah, our first episode came out in September.
Yeah, we were already recording. We just hadn't, released it. So that's obviously a pretty big change. Now, the other thing I've done with my life is I make content all the time. During a 2-month period this year, I wrote 200 pages of content. I write roughly half-ish of the episodes that we do. I've been out here doing stuff. I'm speaking, I'm doing all that kind of stuff. I really sharply cut back on media consumption. I read a little bit at night and I watch TV some, unless my daughter wants to watch something or if Game of Thrones is on. Like, that's pretty much it.
Well, you've only got, by the time this comes out, you won't have that anymore.
Yeah, I know. And I'm kind of ready for that to be over, honestly, because it's gotten dark and it's not, I don't look forward to it, So yeah, I have that book coming out in August. I have a few other things in the pipeline that are kind of proposals for content, and I'm going to continue writing more. So that's a pretty huge change for me to actually, get off my butt and actually create things, because that was the thing I was having trouble doing before.
Where I'm at now, I have a full-time developer job. I am an advanced or mid-level software developer. So when we started this podcast, I was not even in development. I was still learning. And I have gone from complete noob to mid-level since we started it. And if you go back and you listen to the episodes, or if you just look at the content that we have, you can almost see the progression in my knowledge and understanding.
Yeah. Well, you can see mine too, honestly.
Yeah. Speaking of going through that, we've had a lot of major life changes happen as we've gone through this process beyond beard trims and haircuts. Because when we started this, we both had massive beards, and they've come and gone, and it's just something that we live with. So, Will, what are some of the major life changes that have happened to you throughout this process of the last few years?
Starting a job and getting promoted. That's pretty obvious. The other thing is I've discovered that I really enjoy learning foreign languages. Mm-hmm. The other thing is I realized I can do the public speaking thing. And that was huge because I used to be extremely shy. And, at the end of March, I was up in front of somewhere between 180 and 200 people. And I didn't get nervous until after I sat down.
Awesome. That's wonderful, man. I, too, have started a job and been promoted. Kind of amazing, the things that have happened. I've started back to school, in grad school for data science, and I'm getting back into shape, too.
Yeah, you've lost a fair bit of weight.
Almost 30 pounds.
Yeah.
Since February.
I think a lot of that, too, that almost tracks with the, you were kind of in a dark place. And it's like a lagging indicator of getting out of that.
Other things, I've started going back to church. I've gotten back into art. I am painting and writing. Talk about things that I never thought I'd do. You mentioned the foreign language for you. I'm learning to play the guitar. Something I've always wanted to do, but never thought was possible.
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? Like you get into this creative stuff and it just drags you into all the other stuff that you could do.
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm saving up right now to buy a nice camera because I'm on the creatives team at church and they're going to teach me photography so that I can help out taking pictures at events and stuff. I mean, it's just like there's all sorts of awesome things going on in my life right now. And I think a lot of it is due to being creative and doing the podcast every week. And that discipline, it's like, if you know a lot of creative, artistic people, a lot of people think that you can't be creative and have discipline.
Yeah, and I don't think you can be creative and not have it. Really.
You can't be successfully creative and not have it.
Yeah, it's like you get in your own way so much.
Right.
Otherwise.
Yeah. I know the creative group that I'm in at church, one of the things that she really pushes is finishing projects. Because as artists, we never want to finish it. You know, it's never actually done. And Will and I run into this too when we're writing outlines, especially in the early days, where we'd be like, we'd get stuff in there and it's like, all right, but I want to do this and I want to add this stuff and I want to go look this stuff up and add more. And it would come down to the wire. And we finally got to the point where we're like, all right, we just got to go with it. And that happened enough times that we got it to the point where we would just create. And it's just like, all right, I've got it to the point where it is a product that we can use. Some of our most popular episodes have been things that we were just looking to fill a slot. We didn't have a really great idea or inspiration. So we put something together and then it turned out being great because we weren't focused on building something specific. And we're kind of getting into the next thing we were going to talk about, which is our lessons learned from podcasting. And so first off, we're going to talk about things related to podcasting. I know we get asked questions about it all the time. We have some listeners that are interested in starting their own podcasts. We have some podcasters that listen to us. I don't know why some of the people that listen to us. Yeah. Shout out to our friends over at Coding Blocks. Shout out to the .NET Core podcast.
Productivity and Tech.
Productivity and Tech. Thank you. If I try to list everyone, I'm going to forget someone. I'm just throwing out the ones that I remember have commented on our stuff.
It's really amazing. So as far as lessons learned, my first and only one, and it's really the only one that I've really, really internalized that's mattered a lot to me, is that it's not that your haters hate you because they ain't you. They don't like you because they're not your audience, and you should be okay with that. It's so much more valuable to have to have an audience that really likes you, even if it's small, versus some huge audience that's kind of lukewarm.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think that's a good life point too, is it's better to have a small, really close, really good group of friends. And this is something that's hard for me because I love people and I like having a massive group of friends. But I think that's very important. Actually, on that note, this is not really in the outline, but I've come up with a new term between like best friend and friends, and it's my favorite people.
There you go.
Because I've got a lot of friends. I've got a lot of Facebook friends, acquaintances, people I know, but my favorite people are those friends that I'm either close with or I want to become close with. Some people call them their best friends, but I'm like, best implies one best friend.
Right.
And so I like this term, my favorite people. So I've been using that lately if you follow me on social media. As far as what I have learned related to podcasting, the obvious is the audio editing, mastering techniques, the equipment. I've learned so much from that, and a big shout out to our friend in Atlanta, Jason, for teaching me a lot. Like, he is the reason our podcast is as good of a quality as it is. And honestly, if I'd listened to him more often, it'd probably be even better quality.
Yeah, he helped a ton.
He really did. No, I've learned so much about that they've asked me to help out with the audio like recordings and videos that they do at church. And I think that and something that we talked about earlier, which is just the consistency and timeliness. Like if I say I'm going to do something in a certain time frame, it gets done in that time frame. People like that, apparently. Who knew?
Yeah. Funny how that works.
So things we've learned related to coding and other business in general.
Yeah, and I only really had one point here, and that is that you need to stop with the whole ready, aim, fire thing and start with the ready, fire, aim thing. Every time you make something is going to be a learning experience. And it doesn't matter how much you prepare, so you might as well go ahead and create things and put them out there and get the feedback and get the learning from it instead of trying to get it perfect before you release.
Oh, I totally get this. You can't paint your 50th painting if you never paint your first.
Right.
It's practice that makes you better at things, and you learn by failure. And that's something that we didn't really put in here, either one of us, but that is one of the lessons that I have learned is, I guess more from development than anything else, but is you learn most by not succeeding.
And just like even episodes that we didn't like, that we thought stunk, I think that's one thing that we've learned the hard way is that we really don't have a clue what's going to be good or not.
That's true. A few things that I've learned related to coding and stuff is that being a developer is like being a shapeshifter of the business world. You might work on one app for 6-8 months, and you have to learn all sorts of business stuff, like how that business works. And then you step away from it and you go work on something else. The technology stack may be the same. The language and the way you're coding may be the same, but the business rules and that are going to be different. And so you got to be able to shift. And I kind of like that. The other thing that I learned is to build processes for doing things and, when to automate stuff. Not getting too into the process either. Like we don't want to forget what we're trying to accomplish here. That's something that Will and I in the early days and still occasionally do bumped heads on is, it's like, all right, well, we need to change this to get better SEO, but that messes with my process and it makes it more difficult on me. I have to come up with a new process. And it's like bumping heads, and y'all can't see me hitting my fists together, but these are conversations that we have had, and it's things that I have learned is, all right, I do need to build processes, but also in building those processes to make things easier, I need to understand what the ultimate goal is. The process is not the goal.
Most things in life are skills that can be learned, even things we thought we'd never be able to do. And so we're going to kind of talk about some of those. Mine are pretty simple, and I've kind of covered it already. Like being able to produce content at a high rate consistently is something I never thought I could do. I thought that creativity was something I got in fits and starts, and I didn't have process around that. I didn't have understanding of my triggers for being creative, for having creative input, I guess is the best way to put it. And I think I've got that down now pretty well. The other thing I learned, is that having better boundaries. I can look back at stuff that I wrote, in my personal journal from, right as we were starting the podcast and compare to now. And there's a lot of people that are not in my life anymore, or they're at a distance, or it has changed the relationship. And it's because I learned better boundaries, and that happened over this time as well.
What I've really learned is that I can do anything with the right motivation. Most things in life, like we said, are a skill set. I, for the longest time, thought I cannot learn to play guitar because I don't have that talent. I'm not musically talented, so I just can't play guitar. What I didn't realize is even people that are talented have to practice all the time. That, and I'd always been trying to learn to play rhythm guitar, and it turns out I'm actually fairly decent at lead guitar, which everyone always told me, well, that's harder. Then I got an instructor that's like, all right, I'm going to teach you a little bit of rhythm, a little bit of lead, and a technique each week. Guess what I took to?
Yeah.
The lead. While Will was working on his stuff, I was, sitting, playing my guitar, playing the lead part to Sweet Child of Mine. Not quite as fast as Slash, but, I love that. I really like Slash's style, by the way. So I play a lot of Guns N' Roses, Velvet Revolver stuff. That and I'm picking it up. I mean, I've been doing it for a couple of months now, and I was in my lesson the other day, and my instructor was like, "All right, now," he's taught me the strumming pattern. He's like, "All right, now play this chord," and I just moved to it. He's like, "All right, now this one," and he showed me the chord progression. After 2 or 3 times just calling out the chords and me doing it, he just started singing it, and we played the whole song.
Yeah,
that was the most awesome thing ever. And last week I was in there and we were working on some more complicated stuff, and I played it and I'm like, that doesn't sound right. And I looked down and I realized, because we're doing bar chords, I realized I was on the wrong fret, and I moved, and I'm like, all right, yeah, that's right. My instructor, he was writing stuff out for me. He looks up and he's like, did you just tell that by the sound? I'm like, yeah. He's like, man, you're coming along. You're really making progress. Like, that meant a lot to me. Words of affirmation, y'all. That means a lot to me. But, it was one of those things. I'm like, he's right. I couldn't do that a few months ago, but I practice every day, and that's what it takes. Like, so many things in life, even for the really talented people, someone who is really talented at guitar but never practices is not going to be as good as the person who isn't talented but practices all the time.
Yeah, and they may never even know they were good.
Very true.
Because, I mean, that doesn't come out really until you start kind of getting traction. And that's a magical moment when you're doing something really hard and it just all flows.
Oh, yeah. I remember when it clicked for me. I think I was doing the intro to Wanted, Dead or Alive, and my instructor had stepped out to copy some stuff for me, and he was coming back in, and I'm just like, I'm playing it. And I'm like, hey, I'm kind of getting this. And he's like, dude, you like, I had just seen it. He's like, you're really picking it up. I'm like, that was really cool. It was just one of those wow moments. I'm like, I've been working at this for months now, and it's clicking, and I'm loving it. I'm not very fast yet, but like, that's my next thing. I'm working on speed.
Yeah.
So it's just, there's so much stuff in life that I thought I couldn't do that I now look at and go, you know what? It's a skill. If I train myself, I may not have the talent of someone like famous or someone great, but I can still do the thing with enough training.
For real. Now, another thing we learned is some lessons the hard way. And my first one was that nothing replaces microphone discipline.
He's still learning that one, y'all.
Yeah, it's better. I mean, for the most part, I have to make sure the microphone is a little bit low. Like, getting that right was a huge improvement just in my ability to actually record stuff, because I would be talking and I was worrying about making mistakes. And so like, if you do the right stuff ahead of time, and you're disciplined about things, you don't have to worry about the mistakes as much. And so that was a huge win. And the other thing is keep your freaking eyes on the outline. Oh, there it is. So the next lesson I learned was that creation will teach you more than consumption. I was listening to business podcasts and listening to content marketing podcasts and all this other stuff when we started this podcast. I learned a whole lot more, I think, probably just in the first 10 or 15 episodes of doing something than I did listening to somebody else talk about how they did it in hundreds of episodes. Now, the final thing I learned, and this is something that surprises me just about every single day, is that it's entirely possible to be surprised at where you ended up and still be in the right place.
That is so true. I say that all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, look at where I'm at. I'm in a job with a future. I was not looking to go into government work. Even when I got into development, I was not looking to go into government work. And like, it's just, I don't know. I completely agree with that. I think all the time how blessed I am to be where I'm at. Things that I learned. Number one, time management. I've got the artistic creative bent, and we tend to get caught up in things, and just my personality style and time management do not go together. I mean, I learned some time management in med school, but not a lot, because it was pretty much everything was med school. It was all studying. And so the time management there was, all right, how much time on each subject, not how much time between different things. When I really learned it was when I had someone relying on me. I kind of already mentioned this, but having Will relying on me to edit the episode and get it published each week, it was that external motivation I needed to show me how to build my own internal motivation. That makes sense.
I would agree with that. And I also think there's a marked difference in things like punctuality now compared to early on. Because, I mean, I remember, back in the day, and this is more like college, we're like, oh, Beej is late and the sun's rising in the east tomorrow. Right? Yeah. Like, it was just like, those are equivalent statements. Those are constants. And now I remember when you started really getting it together, like there was a point where you just kind of clicked and you started fixing that, and it completely screwed me up because I'd scheduled planning on you being late. You remember that? I was getting nailed for like 6 months. It's like, he's on time.
I remember that a lot because you get frustrated at me. I'm like, dude, we said we were meeting at 5:30. It's 5:30 and I'm here. And he's like, yeah, but you're always late. So I was expecting you to be here at 6.
Yeah. It's like, you don't understand. I'm trying to eat. Yeah. I'm waiting on my beer to get cold. You messed up my day.
But, well, the thing is, when it came to work, I was always very punctual, always early. Yeah,
that's true.
It was outside of work that I never translated it.
Yeah, and it's like you switched over and this became work in a lot of respects.
The thing is, it's not just this. It was everywhere in my life. Yeah. It's like I took that. I guess I looked at, hey, I'm, in whatever I was doing work-wise, I was successful. Even when I was in sales and stuff, I get into something, I'd be successful at it. And I was like, all right, what's making me successful there? What am I doing there that I'm not doing in other areas? The punctuality and getting things done when I said I was going to do them, things like that was one of the things that I noticed. And I made a concerted effort to start doing that. And it was a little bit of a process, but over time that happened. And it's just natural to me now. I'm always early to things. Another thing that I learned the hard way, I think we both did, is dealing with conflict, especially mid-episode conflict.
Yes, especially some of those early ones, because we haven't had much of that.
Oh no, but the thing is, we're really good and we understand each other a lot better now. Even though we'd been friends for 10, 15 years when we started, we didn't understand each other near as well as we do now.
Yeah, and that includes being roommates, right? Because like as roommates, you can make decisions in your room, and that's your room, whatever. But when it's our podcast, it's not a thing without both of us agreeing. There's sparks that get struck. Yeah. And so figuring out the content stuff. And the other thing is I had to learn to kind of stand up and go, no, we're not doing it that way. Because I would get mad and I would just get cranky early on, and I wouldn't just be like, no, that's dumb. Whether it was dumb or not, like just going ahead and getting it out there, like was not something I did very well.
No, it wasn't. And there's a couple of times where you've been like, you would question it. Like when you finally got this, you would question it and I'd be like, this is why I'm doing it that way, or this is why we should do it that way. And you're like, I didn't see it that way. There's other times where you would question it. It would be like, oh, because that was just the way that it seems easiest. And you're like, why don't we do it this way? And it's like, oh, well, that's even better. So like there's the other thing here is that give and take. The one that I really think about is the dating episode that never got published.
Yeah, that was rough.
We were halfway through that episode and I just stopped and I said, I'm getting really frustrated. And Will was like, I am too. So we stopped recording. We spent about 30 minutes talking about it. And we realized that that episode really wasn't the right episode at the time. And some of the topics in it were just not the best. And so we ended up writing a conflict resolution episode that became one of our more popular episodes at the time because it was from the heart. Like we were talking about what was going on. And kind of on that, another thing that I've really had to learn the hard way is how to direct and produce myself and Will. And it's kind of fallen on me as the audio guy to, throughout the episode, go, all right, wait, re-say that, or say it in this manner, or kind of have the creative vision for what it's going to look like at the end, the final product of the episode. And it's very interesting. It's one thing to do that for yourself, because I've done some individual audio recordings where I'll be like, all right, no, I'm going to need to re-say that this way or that way. But to do it with myself and another person where I'm the talent and the director, I've got a whole nother respect for those directors that are also stars. Other thing, I've been helping out with some of the creative media at church. Like I said, I'm on the creative team there, and it's really, really different being a part of someone else's creative vision. Just recently, we recorded some stuff that I was part of the talent and I was doing the audio for, but it wasn't my creative vision. It's like I was being directed. I was being told what to do. It was actually kind of relaxing to not have to worry about that. I'm like, oh, you want me to say it this way? Okay, let me say it this way. Oh, let me you want me to reword it to this? Okay, I can do that. And then the last one is just something I think both of us have done, and we still struggle with sometimes, is how to repeat ourselves with the same vocal patterns and intonations.
Yeah, instead of getting frustrated.
Sometimes we have to do that multiple times too.
Yeah. And sometimes we do the episode multiple times.
That's true. That's true. So next, we're going to quickly go through some of the opportunities and activities that have come about through podcasting. First off, speaking opportunities.
Let's see. I spoke at MicroConf this year. I've spoken at Music City Tech, at DevSpace. I've talked in front of, 10 or 12 different cohorts at Nashville Software School, a couple of cohorts at Covalence. We've had our meetups. Yeah, there's just been a whole bunch of stuff as far as the speaking that is just everywhere.
And I've spoken at Music City Tech, DevSpace, a lot of the same places that Will has. The difference, I've done We Rock It or We Rock IT. I'm not sure. I've heard it said both ways. It was a brand new conference down in Huntsville, put on by the Women in Tech. So it was very interesting. I was one of the few guy speakers there, and talked about my path into development. Another place I've spoken at is Code Mash, which is a huge conference up in Ohio. Really cool. And I'm super duper excited to announce that in July of this year, I will be speaking at Codeland in New York City.
Very nice.
Yeah, that's really cool. We've also made a lot of connections with other people and other opportunities that have come up.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many people that we've had interactions with, and we've been able to have those interactions because we have a podcast.
That's so true. There's people that we have met, mentors, people we have looked up to. Like, we were on .NET Rocks a couple of years ago, like early into our podcasting career. I think the most important thing, to me at least, is the friendships.
Yeah, we built our tribe.
We have.
Effectively. I mean,
yeah, we've got some amazing friends, and some of them live close. Some of them used to live close and have moved away. Some of them live further away, but we have an amazing set of friends that some of whom we never would have met had we not been podcasting or running a meetup group. Like, we wouldn't have started the meetup group if we hadn't been podcasting. And we've just met some just phenomenal people and become good friends with them because of this. That was one of the things that's really stuck with me. And kind of on that, we're going to talk about some of our favorite parts of podcasting. And kind of to help us maintain a good mix, we've categorized our episodes into various skills: tech, life, and business. Tech skills, these are topics having to do with development, computer science, math, or other technical areas.
Life skills are soft skills, communication, personal development, time management, the skills that are the glue that makes all the other stuff work.
And business skills are topics involving sort of the business side of development, from project management to people management to how to communicate with sales or business people. And then we've had some special episodes, and if y'all been listening for any amount of time, you know about our April 1st episode every year. But these episodes could be on anything, and they have been. I love our special episodes, though I haven't gotten to write one yet.
Yeah, you need to do that.
I think
it just seems like it's like you're really crazy busy that time of year or something. I don't know how that's happened the way it has, but yeah, it totally does need to be you next time. So I guess let's talk through our favorite episodes or parts of episodes. I'll start with mine. As far as the tech, I really liked the episode on considerations when doing integrations. I wrote that one, but I wrote it while dealing with a lot of those issues at work, and it helped me clarify the stuff I was having to think through at the office and vice versa.
My favorite tech episode was the Code Smells episodes. I wrote them as one episode, and they ended up being too long for one, so we split it into 2 episodes. It took quite a bit of work to put that together. The thing I like about it is even a junior developer can smell when the code has gone sour. I like that so much, I even turned it into a talk that I give at coding schools. That's very encouraging, and be like, look, when you get out into the workforce, even in your very first job, you can find things to improve.
Yeah, that's really true. And, by the way, it's surprising to me how often we've taken stuff that has been in episodes and we've turned it into other content. Now, my favorite episode on life, or I won't say favorite, was the one this April 1st. That was a really hard episode to write. I'm glad to have written it. I won't say that it was a favorite because there was a lot of stuff in there that was kind of hard, but I will say out of, the life related podcast, that was probably the favorite.
So far as the life skills episodes, the dealing with loss, I know that's sort of a tough one to say is your favorite, but we talked about losing our friend Jason to cystic fibrosis and how that affected us. Like I had known Jason since we were 5. It was really good to get that out and reminisce on some of the fun times that we had with Jason, tell some of the jokes and stuff. A little cathartic, but I've also heard from a lot of people that hearing that helped them. Kind of the testimony thing, I guess. Also, I know how much it meant to his mom when she listened to the episode. Like, yeah. She called me up afterwards and just was almost in tears because she's like, I did not realize how big of an influence he'd had on you guys. I think that one and the one that you mentioned, the April 1st episode this year, are probably 2 of our most powerful episodes that we've had.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Now, as far as the business episodes, I really enjoyed writing the episode on reinvesting your gains. This one came out of a question that somebody asked us, and then I just kind of ran with it, and it didn't really stick with the question anymore. But I think a lot of people found it useful anyway, and it clarified my thought process on a lot of that stuff.
My favorite business episode, and I kind of talked about time management earlier, was increasing the value of your time. This came out of an email that a good friend of ours sent to me back when I was in grad school, trying to help me. I mean, it was the start of my time management journey, really. Like, that email kicked it off. Like I said, time management is an area that I've struggled with most of my life. The further along I've gotten in school, the better I got at it. But, that's something that I put a lot of effort into, and I really liked that episode. We've talked about our favorite episodes that we wrote. We've also had some really awesome conversations and some great guest episodes. Now, all of our guests have been wonderful, and we've enjoyed each and every conversation. We've had a few favorites, so we're kind of going to go through those.
Yeah, so the tech one for me was the progressive web apps episode, just because of how much stuff you could do with a web browser. Because I remember writing code for Mosaic, and that was just an absolute, head-popping experience going, wow, look what's happened.
I liked that episode. That episode was great. But talking about progressive web apps, if we go to my favorite meetup, it would be where we had Adriana from Google, like a Google developer, flew into Nashville, gave us a hands-on tutorial on building a progressive web app. That was awesome.
Was so cool.
That was. We learned so much from that. Everyone had such a great time. And she was just a really awesome person, too. Now, podcasting-wise, my favorite tech podcast with a guest And this is stretching a little bit to call it tech, but it was the Science Fiction Becomes Fact with Ed Charbonneau.
Yeah, that was a very cool episode.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of speculative fiction, and I just remember talking to Ed at, I believe it was DevSpace, about this because he does a talk on the topic and just how interesting and fun it was. I just learned a lot from talking to him about the episode and during the episode. It was so much fun.
As far as life stuff, the multiple podcasts we've had with John Sonmez, I've really gotten a lot out of those. And I think a lot of people get a lot of value out of his stuff. I mean, I'm in Bulldog mindset and all that, and I highly recommend it.
My favorite was, and this is the outgoing extrovert in me, the conversation that we had with Aaron and Cody about effective communication. I mean, that was so much fun. There were 4 of us all in that tiny room in your basement, with all the mics plugged in, sitting around a table, having this conversation, joking, drinking. It was just a blast. It was a pain in the butt to edit, but it was a lot of fun to record. Yeah. I think it took me, at that time, my speed was about 3 to 3.5 hours per episode. It took me about 6 hours. So twice as long to edit that episode than any other at the time. But that the episode turned out so well, and we had so much fun recording it.
Yeah, I remember that. As far as business, the episode recently with Stephen Fowler was definitely one of my favorites. I got a lot out of it, and I actually took some of his advice and ran with it.
That's awesome, man.
And I'm waiting to see how that turns out because I'm kind of still brewing that. But
business-wise, I think my favorite, it was really a toss-up. I really liked the LinkedIn stuff with Amber because I took a lot out of that. But so far as just favorite episode-wise would be Developers and the Law with Gary Nissenbaum. He was so well prepared for that interview. And y'all, I'm going to tell you, we are not media. Like, we're not reporters. We're not trying to trip people up. We are educators. The purpose of this podcast is education. So we send out our questions, if we have them done in time, to our guests, because the goal is not to trip up our guests. The goal is to provide value to our listeners.
And holy cow, did he crush that interview.
Oh, he did. They told me he spent the weekend preparing for it. And that was back when we recorded on Monday nights. And he came in, and not only did he have answers for all the questions, but he had transitions. Like, we did not have to even make the transitions between his answer and the question because it flowed. He would close out his answer, and it's like, all right, that leads right into our next question. And that episode flowed so well. It was so easy to edit. He had a good voice for it, and he had some really great technical people on his side making sure it came through clear. Oh, that was one of my favorite episodes to record and to edit.
Yeah. I mean, he was super duper prepared. So I guess let's talk through our favorite special episodes. My favorite special episode was the one with David Whitley that we did last April 1st, I think, or was it the one before that? It's been a while.
Yeah, it was the one before that.
Yeah. So David Whitley is an old-time strongman, and it's unusual for him to be on a programming podcast, but we talked about how to get through mental barriers, and we actually should have him on again one of these days. And he was talking about how to break a coconut and all that. You remember that?
Mm-hmm. I remember you trying to do it.
I did it.
Doing it.
Yeah. And then going, crap, I don't have a coconut to practice with. Yeah. That was wild. Breaking one with your hand and then being surprised by that.
So my favorite special episode was the children's stories. That was the one before the most recent one. I liked how we talked about the message in the story and also about the lesson that could be learned for developers. It was kind of a fun, unique way to see those stories. That's one of the things, like, my creative side really likes taking things that people are accustomed to and used to and looking at them from a perspective that people aren't looking at them from. So that was one of my favorites to do. Now I've got one that doesn't exactly fit into a category because it wasn't a special episode, but it really wasn't a normal one either. And that was the open spaces that I did at DevSpace last year. That was just so much fun. we just had a group of people, and people came and went from this chat. But we were just passing around the microphone. Everyone was so great with their microphone discipline and only talking when they had it so that I could record. It was just a lot of fun just to sit around with people and do that. And surprisingly, the editing on that episode was not as difficult as I thought it would be. I didn't put this in earlier in the episode, but I thought of it when I was filling this out. Favorite parts of this episode?
I think the lessons learned part, like seeing our individual character arcs in this episode and talking through that, because it's not something you look back on much. You don't realize how much you've changed until you really look.
For me, it was looking back at all the fun times that we had and the great guests. Like this section, creating the favorites. I mean, it was hard to pick. I went through, and I've got the episodes divided into years, and I went through looking at all of them. And it was hard to pick, but I had a lot of fun. Like I would look at one and be like, oh man, I remember that. That was so funny when they said this or this happened. Like just reminiscing was probably the best part. Now y'all, to close everything out, we're going to talk about some of the funniest parts of podcasting. The bloopers.
Yeah, or the verbal blunders especially. We are not eloquent speakers. Basically, what's going on here is there's two hillbillies in a basement with microphones. Everything that you would expect from that. Beach's editing is what makes it not as you would expect.
Yeah, we have several verbal blunders every week. We've gotten a lot better about it since we started doing the live show and we started doing more public speaking.
And preparing better.
Yeah. Most don't make it past the cutting room floor, but there's a few that I kept around. Most of the time, it's worth saving, especially when we tease each other about it. When you've been friends as long as we have, you mock each other constantly. Also, we occasionally get excited and we'll talk over each other. This can lead to some rather interesting audio when going back through it.
So that sped up the Earths. Earth. That's a nice Earth.
But let me just say that going from Black Abbey Rose to Yazoo Dos Perros is amazing.
I'm pretty sure it's Dos Perros, actually.
I said Dos
not.
Perros.
It's Dos Perros. That's the version after 6.22. It's not real well known. Probably never heard of it. Stroking my hipster beard right now.
Anyways, we had the lunch.
Wascally Wabbit. We had a Wascally Wabbit for lunch.
It's 10 to the power of 23 in Avogadro's number. See, I didn't call it Avocado's number.
That's good. It's not easy being green.
No. Educational or how you learn, and interpersonal.
How qualified are you for a job as a Swedish chef anyway?
Bloopers reel.
For instance, software running in orbit isn't something you update willy-nilly, like on the International Space Station. Space Station! By Sean Connery. A book fell off and hit my head. I can only blame myself.
Another thing that happens a lot is unintended story time. We both tell stories and make interesting analogies, and it's one of the charms of the show. Not all of the stories are going to make it to production. Many times they're either just a little too far off topic for a particular episode or maybe not entirely appropriate.
Yeah. So now we're going to share a couple of those stories. Oh, hey, speaking of white whales, this is way off topic.
Did you go on Tumblr again?
Wow. Bloopers reel. So, speaking of white whales, I finally have my concert white whale. I got tickets to the Garth concert.
Nice.
Yeah, super excited. Really funny. I told my mom about it, and she was like, I thought about getting you those tickets. And I'm like, you did? She's like, yeah, I saw them go on sale. I went online and I saw the price and I was deciding whether or not to buy them for you. And then they were sold out.
Wow.
Yeah. I've got Garth tickets. I haven't been yet. So, still that I've always wanted to go.
The fire?
Well, yeah, but life is not tried; it is merely survived. If you're standing outside the fire, I wasn't even planning on doing music lyrics this episode.
Sorry, he made a face up.
That just looked like that.
Yeah, he's not making a face. That's just his normal face. Yeah.
Well, he looked directly at me while he was making.
Will's over here using his nonverbals to mess everybody up.
BJ's getting passive aggressive with his fireballs.
Yeah. All right.
Aaron's over here being assertive.
And Cody's just passively waiting to be aggressive.
Pretty much. I feel like that's my default style.
Yeah.
The barren weight.
It's MC Hammer style. Stop. Hammer time.
Literally. Yeah.
What I said about management, we ought to do an episode on management, especially we've got the one first time in leadership, but on management, because in my experience, it's almost like, oh, hey, you've been managed your whole life, your whole work life. So obviously you know how to manage because you've been the one that receives it.
Right. So after my second hernia surgery, I'm going to just start cutting strangers open because clearly that logic should apply everywhere.
Exactly. That's what I'm getting at. That's why I think we should do an episode on it. And finally, sometimes we're just off our game. And if you watch our live episodes, you can see it live.
Like tonight?
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, it's a lack of eloquent speaking. It's just being in weird moods. Sometimes it's alcoholic beverages, maybe a little.
Sometimes Will's doing low carb. I have a few times where he goes, "Not my fault, low carb."
Yeah. I mean, there's been a couple times I just couldn't English.
Yeah, there are. And it's funny going back. It was frustrating when I was editing it, though.
Clearly, I just looked at this.
You obviously did not look at the link I sent you earlier today.
No.
Because I sent you this link earlier today when I found it. I'm like, this is awesome. I mainly sent it to you so I could find it later on when I was writing this up. But
so it's materials tech.
Yeah. Hey, let me get into it. Unless you want to start with, obviously I didn't read.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah. Totally start with that. Might as well.
Point of interest. Why aren't we doing that?
Yeah. Because we're not dishonest charlatans.
But we are dishonest charlatans.
Yeah.
We just haven't figured out how to capitalize on that.
Yeah. We don't have paid memberships to Dunning-Kruger Club.
Right.
Yeah. It's totally different.
No, but seriously,
it's always great when you're having some kind of low-level conversation about operating system level threading problems, and all of a sudden you're like, I can't typing.
I didn't know dictatorial was a word.
I would have murdered it. I never would have got it right.
Yeah. I was going to say, I didn't know dictatorial was a word. I would have murdered it. Is this word your word? Is this the slogan of your house?
I never would have gotten that right.
House Cody. I would have murdered it.
Yeah.
yes.
Wow. Low carb. Not my fault.
They say the journey is more important than the destination. And now that we've reached the end of episode 200, we can definitely say it's been a journey. Whether you've been with us since our first episode way back in 2015, or you just started listening to the podcast this week, we are glad to have you on this journey with us. Raise your glass, because here's to 200 episodes of Complete Developer Podcast and to the path to another 200. That pretty much wraps us up. Before we close everything out, Will, what do you have for us this week for Tricks of the Trade?
Well, this is something that occurred to me the other day, and I realized this is something I act on and didn't have a way of saying. And I think this is useful now that I've got a way of saying it. There's something very similar to regression to the mean in technical decisions. So if a decision can be made fast and by one person, it can be undone the same way. In fact, it has a roughly equivalent probability of being undone the same way. So if your management is cowboy coding in their decisions, by definition, you're a fool if you cowboy code yours. You have to be ready to switch back over. And that just made a lot of sense to me. It's just something that clicked this week. It has no relation to the episode 200, but I thought that was a useful thing to throw out to the audience. That's all I got.
Stand by for Titanfall.
If you have a question or comment, please email us at neckbeards@CompleteDeveloperPodcast.com. Our theme music is an excerpt from Stand By for Titanfall by Pure Bells, available on SoundCloud and licensed through Creative Commons.
The intro music for IoTs is Hillbilly Hip Hop by Jason Belcher. For references, show notes, and to sign up for weekly emails with extra tips and insights, be sure to check out the website at CompleteDeveloperPodcast.com. You can also follow us on Twitter at CompleteDevPod and like our page on Facebook to keep up with news about the show. Catch us each week as we broadcast live, talking about what's going on in the tech world and answering listener questions.
Learn more about all of our shows and groups by going to CompleteDeveloperNetwork.com, where you'll find links to Junior Developer Toolbox, Developer Launchpad, and our other communities. Thanks for listening. See you next time.